Welcome to Ziggifos University. What's the date today? April 24th?
5th?
25th?
25th.
25th today. So, all right, now, this fits in with...
26th.
26?
Yeah,
All
I was
right.
gonna
say,
A little disorientation.
So yesterday was the 25th, all right? And it was the,
24th.
it's Good Shepherd Sunday, fourth Sunday of Easter. And of course, we have our stained glass window, and I did the whole sermon about dealing with that important text, which is it's John chapter 10, verses 11 through 18. So this is today's readings bulletin insert. So you want to read that. Now, what's nice about Ziggifos University, we have an hour and 10 minutes to go through and do unfinished business from the gospel lesson on Sunday, because there's not enough time to really do the gospel lesson justice. So what I'm doing today, I'm taking this Good Shepherd reading, okay, I am the Good Shepherd, and we're going to do what's before it and what's after it. Why? Because when you read the Bible, remember, it's context, context, context. Always put the Bible reading in context. So you come to church, you get the bulletin, that's good, read the lesson over, then go home and open up your Bible and read what comes before it and what comes after it. The idea is you want to know the Bible, right? So that's the goal here. So let's do a little context work here. I have a handout today, and Linda will post a copy of this so the people watching on YouTube can access this, and you follow along with this. And again, you can go home and check it out with your Bible, right? It's a very important thing. So, first of all, let's start with the very beginning. What gospel are we reading here? Gospel of St. John. What does that mean? That means you put on your Gospel of John hat, okay? Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the synoptic gospels. Synoptic, it means together. Sync, right? Optic, see together. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you can put them in parallel columns, and it's basically the same story, right? Same story told. Now, the Gospel of John is a different thing, right? We think it was written around 85 AD, right? And so that's about, 50 years after the anchor date of 33 AD. What's that? The death, burial, resurrection of Christ is 33 AD. So always start with that anchor point and then go, okay, let's go out this way. So 85 AD, Gospel of John, right? So John has had a chance to reflect. He's an old man at this point, and he's probably not as old as Mr. Becker, but he's pretty old. He's right up there. Maybe Joe Choupet's age. Ancient guy. No, so he's an old man looking back at his life, and he writes the Gospel of John. And why is he writing it? So that you might have faith in Jesus, right? So it's the most mature of the four Gospels. Mark is the most primitive, the raw feed, right? John is the most advanced. So when you read John, you have a lot of long speeches by Jesus, right? So here's another way of reading it. We have the 7 signs of Jesus. Remember the 7 signs and the 7 I am statements. The 7 signs. The first one is John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. The water into wine at Cana and wedding in Galilee. The next is healing of the royal official's sons. That's John chapter 4. Then here we have the third sign. And that's where today's study begins. John chapter 5, verse 1. So go there or follow along in the outline. And the topic of today's discussion is opposition to the Son of God. Opposition. Now, it's hard for us to understand because we're Christian, and we look back at it and we go, well, why wouldn't everyone believe in Jesus? Right? So the key to understanding the Gospel of John, it's location. Okay, what's this? Here's our map of Israel. Ready? Now the map of Israel, it's about the size of the state of New Jersey, 150 miles north-south, about 50 miles east-west, and it's 3. Galilee is in the north. Jesus of Nazareth is from Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, right? It's 8 miles wide, 13 miles north-south. Capernaum, when he's up here, he's basically safe. It's his hometown, home territory. In the middle are the Samaritans, the parable of the Good Samaritan. We'll talk about that another time. And then in the south is Judea. This is where Jerusalem is. So when John says the Jews did this or the Jews did that, he's talking about the Judeans who live down here. They look down on the people who live up here in Galilee, right? So these are kind of like, people from Brooklyn or people from Tennessee or people from Oklahoma or something. They look down on them, right? They're not sophisticated like the people who live in New York. See how that works, right? So people who come from the outlying territories and go to a city like New York, they kind of look down on you. They think you're a bumpkin, hick or something. That's how they thought about people from Galilee, okay? So when Jesus goes down here, he's in enemy territory. He meets opposition. Opposition, okay? Now, who are the groups? Remember, you look at the bottom of the handout today. You have to be able to count to 4, actually 5, if you read the Bible. And I've done this before, but we'll do it again. When you want to understand the opposition to Jesus, there are 4 political parties, religious/political parties. The first are the Pharisees. The second are the Sadducees. The third are the Zealots. And the fourth are the Essenes. Now let's break them up. Let's start with the Sadducees because that's the easiest to understand. The Sadducees are based in the Second Temple in Jerusalem. Second Temple. And remember, the Second Temple is destroyed, what date? August 10th, 70 AD by the 5th, 10th, 12th, and 15th Roman legions. How bad was the destruction? They burned the temple to the ground, and the Jews that were in the city were basically slaughtered on the spot in vicious street fighting. Anyone who was happy, anyone who was able to live through that, they were sold into slavery by the Romans, right? And that's standard operating procedure. When the Romans show up in your city, you surrender. You do not fight these people. And if you do fight them, there are really serious negative consequences. Like they burn your city, and if you live, you're sold into slavery. You're annihilated as a nation and as a name. So 70 AD is the central tragedy of the New Testament time, New Testament period. So when you read the Bible, you always have to keep in mind, they're writing about what the temple is going to be destroyed. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they were probably all written prior to 70 AD. And they're talking about the coming first Jewish war that breaks out in 66 AD, and it ends in 63, 64 AD with the destruction of Masada. 70 AD is the destruction of the temple. So when you read the New Testament, everyone knows about that, the coming apocalypse, right? So the Sadducees are based in the temple in Jerusalem. And who are they? These are the high priests. These are the Levites. These are the aristocratic people who run the temple in Jerusalem. And what is the temple? The temple is a place of religious, central point of religion, central point of politics, and central point of economics. Every year, the 8 million Jews who live in the diaspora, that's the Mediterranean Sea, you're required to send a temple tax every year. And there are 2 million Jews who live in Israel, this map right here, about 2 million, and 6 million who live outside of this territory. And they send 1 denarii, that's the annual temple tax. Well, if you do this for a long period of time, a couple of centuries, you're going to have a huge amount of money. And the money is held in the temple treasury. It's like Fort Knox for the Jews in the 1st century AD. Huge amount of money, okay? So it's the banking center, it's the political center, and again, who are the people that run the temple in Jerusalem? The Sadducees. They make up about half of the Sanhedrin. That's like the Supreme Court and the U.S. Senate combined into one body. There's 71, 72 members of that. The Sanhedrin has made it a political accommodation with the Romans, who have been occupying this area since 63 BC. Okay? So Jesus is living in an occupied country. It's now 33 AD. It's almost 100 years the Romans have occupied this territory. And what do the Romans want? Peace and quiet, law and order. They want you to pay the annual tribute to Rome. And they don't want you to do a revolution, and they don't want you undermining the hegemony of the Romans in this area. Now, why is this area so important for the Romans? Why don't they just say, these Jews are hard to deal with, let's just leave and we'll let them have their little country? because this place is the keystone in the arch that goes from the Fertile Crescent at one end and Egypt to the other. And you can't go in between because it's the Arabian desert. Okay? It's a key area. And what's the area? Who are the people at the other end of the Fertile Crescent that are a pain in the neck? The Parthians. Who are they? The Parthians are the Persians. The Persians, what do we call Persians today? Iranians. So the Romans have fought the Parthians for how many years? 500 years. And they're a constant threat. The Romans could never defeat the Parthians. 500 years of fighting. And who did the Parthians fight before they fought the Romans? The Greeks. The Greeks and the Persians went at it. So the Parthians, the Persians, the Iranians have been a pain in the neck for Western civilization going back to the time of the ancient Greeks. That's really important. So why did the Romans want to keep this territory? This is a buffer zone between Rome and the Parthians. So they can't let this country go, because if they do, the Parthians will take it over, and then they'll have a base to maybe attack Rome itself. So they hate the Parthians, right? So what did the Romans do? They made an accommodation with the power elite people, the Sadducees and Pharisees. We'll let you do the religion thing. We'll do the politics. And so what did they say? Okay, we'll do it. Right? And if you look at the Temple Mount, I should bring another picture out here. The Temple Mount has a tower that overlooks it. It's called the Fortress Antonia, named after Mark Antony. And it's taller than the temple. And the Romans can stand up in that, and they can look down and keep an eye on the temple campus to make sure there aren't any revolutions going on. So they're allowed to have their temple, the Jews are, but they're being observed and supervised by the pagan Romans. Remember, the Romans are polytheistic. Okay? So it's a humiliation, a daily humiliation, to have the Romans observing to make sure that the religion doesn't get out of hand. Okay? Now, so these people have basically, the Sadducees and the Pharisees that run the temple have sold their soul to the devil. Well, what do you mean? They made a Faustian pact. What does that mean? We'll let you run the temple, but we get to really direct the world order and the politics. See how that works? Okay? They have to understand this, because when we start talking about Jesus, you'll see how this works. And who are the Essenes? The Essenes are people that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. About 200 years before the time of Jesus, these people got their snoot full of the corruption in the temple, and they went out into the wilderness, and they're kind of like monks who live in the wilderness away from the temple in Jerusalem. They do not recognize the religious authority of the Sadducees and Pharisees because they sold out to the Romans. So they're kind of like, I don't know, hippies, people who live, off the grid, right, out by the Dead Sea. And they wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. And was John the Baptist in a scene? No. Was Jesus in a scene? No. Every once in a while you read in the Weekly World News or something that, people always claim that Jesus was in a scene. No, he wasn't. If you study the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I have, Jesus is radically different than the Essenes. The Essenes are like separationists, The sons of light would be members of their particular group, and everyone else is a son of the devil. So Jesus says, Jesus doesn't take that approach. He says all ethnic groups are welcome to be Christian, to receive the light. Okay, and then the fourth group are the Zealots. Who are they? These are radicalized Pharisees. Okay, so the Pharisees on steroids are the Zealots, and they're called the Sakari. They carry these 18-inch daggers, 1 cubit, and they hide it in their cloak, and they single out collaborators with the Romans. And they walk up to you in the marketplace and stick you under the fifth rib. You're dead. And then when the Romans come to investigate, we didn't see a thing. We had no idea. We have no idea who these people are, right? So the terrorists of the 1st century AD are the Zealots. They're kind of like Al-Qaeda terrorists in Islam right now, okay? And so let's do the Pharisees. Right? You had a question there? Okay, let's do the Pharisees very quickly. The Sadducees believe that the Torah alone it has authority. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Torah alone. The Pharisees, in contrast, believe in the written Torah, the 5 books, plus the oral Torah. They believe that Moses on Mount Sinai received the written Torah and the oral Torah, the oral traditions. Jesus gets into trouble with these people because Jesus basically says, do the written Torah and the oral stuff is a bunch of hooey. Don't get bogged down in that, right? They'll say, Jesus will say something like, you have said, you have heard it said from men of old, but I say unto you. Well, he's attacking the oral Torah, the oral traditions that the Sadducees have equal to the Bible. Okay, that's one of the sources of conflict. The Pharisees are based in the synagogues. How many synagogues, according to Flavius Josephus? 6,000.